The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke. A certain ruler asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. You know the commandments. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not murder. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother." He replied, "I have kept all these since my youth." When Jesus heard this, he said to him, "There is still one thing lacking. Sell all that you own and distribute the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." When he heard this, he became sad, for he was very rich. Jesus looked at him and said, "How hard is it for those who have wealth to enter the kingdom of God?" The Gospel of the Lord.
Well, good morning. We are happy to be back from our trip to Washington, D.C., and I'm so excited for you to hear from these students in a few minutes about our trip there. When people ask about this trip, it was easily the busiest mission trip we've ever been on, and the best way to explain it is this: as leaders, for those 9 days, we were either driving or parking or serving at all times. And if we weren't doing those three things, then we were figuring out where to drive, figuring out where to park, and figuring out where to serve. We had no downtime. We were all over the place. But we had a great time, and these students gave their all each and every day. They woke up early, and they stayed up late. They served in hot factories and in homeless shelters. Each and every one of them gave their first and their best, and we saw that in their work sites each week, and they're gonna tell you about that in a few minutes, but I want to talk about how we as leaders saw that outside of their work sites. If you could make that full screen. Thanks, Jared. Well, you can go to the next slide. We saw it the first night that we arrived at camp. When we get there at camp, the staff had dinner ready for us, and after dinner, the youth work staff asked for volunteers to do dinner cleanup. And nearly every single one of our students raised their hand. And youth work staff was kind of amazed by this because they said it's usually pulling teeth to get people to volunteer to help in that way. We saw these kids serve in their interactions with Claire. If you could go to the next slide. There you are, Claire. The way that these students served and cared for and played with the smallest one in our team. You can go to the next one also. There's a few pictures in there. I think there's one more. Yep. These are 28 of the best babysitters that we could have ever asked for. And they are just so great with her. And we also saw each morning at camp. You see, YouthWorks trips, there's a scheduled time for everything. Not a minute goes by that is not scheduled. It runs like clockwork. Breakfast crew wakes up at 6:45 and they prepare breakfast. And the students get up at 7 and they eat breakfast. And then after breakfast, there's breakfast cleanup. And then there's building cleanup. And then there's devotion time. And devotion time allows the students about an hour each day to prepare spiritually for what they're walking into that day. But because the DC site is so intense and there's literally no time for anything, there wasn't a scheduled time for devotion. So YouthWork staff asked our students to use the time that we drove from our site to the city each morning as their devotion time. Now, this may have worked for other groups, but if you have ever met an Edge student, you know that a car ride is not spent for reading, it is spent for listening to music very loudly. And so that didn't work for our group, but unprompted, the students took the devotions into their own hands. Instead of waking up for breakfast prep at 6:45 or for breakfast at 7, these students set their alarms for 5:55 in the morning. And they got up by themselves, dragged themselves into the cafeteria, and did their devotions, read their Bibles, and filled their journals unprompted. Before youth work staff was awake, before their leaders were awake, these students put the gospel first and they studied their Bibles together, and it was awesome to see. You can go to the next slide. We saw them serve together during our large group gathering, where our students piled into the room each night with their Bibles in their hands, ready to learn about what the teaching was that night. We sang the songs, a lot of the ones we're singing this morning. And we spent time getting to know each other and diving into what Jesus was doing in their lives. And as leaders, we usually have quite a bit of facilitating to do during this time. keeping kids on task, keeping conversation going, but not with this group. They conversed and they listened and they prayed over each other every single night, really until we had to say, hey, it's time for lights out. You have to go to bed. You can't keep praying for each other. Go to bed. No matter how tired and hungry and worn out they were, they served in every single morning, whether it was the community or each other. And I think we have a really cool testimony of that. We actually have one of our youth work staff here this morning. Marcy, if you could stand up. She was one of our staffers in D.C., and she came this weekend to visit our group and to hang out. And so it's been a pleasure having her and getting to keep doing life with her, and the students have had a great time with that. Each summer, YouthWorks has a theme that we focus on during our time at camp. A theme that helps these students connect with Jesus, not just during that week, but to understand how he's working in their lives when they go home. You can go to the next slide. This summer, we talked about the good life. Stationed in a town where the rich live in direct proximity to the poor, where the shadows of monuments touch homeless shelters and food pantries, we were asked this question: what is your definition of the good life? Well, we all have a different answer to that. For some of us, the good life means a family that's together. For others, it's having control of our circumstances. It may mean wealth. It may mean health. It may mean having freedom to chase down your dreams and aspirations. Marriage, a successful career, wisdom, status, these are all things that we are tempted to chase down every day. But here's the thing, no matter what your definition of the good life is, our intended good life has been shattered by sin, by corruption, by deceit, by our inability to be perfect. From the beginning, God's intent has been for us to live the good life. God started a family, and that family became a nation called Israel. And God gave Israel guidance on how to live a good life together. And the entirety of that was built on God's pursuit of mending a broken relationship with us. The hope that is found in Jesus allows us to forego the cheap imitations that the world offers us and to find the good life in him alone. We realize that the things that we may strive for, a family together, control of our circumstances, health, wealth, marriage, successful careers, those can be good things, but they must not be ultimate things. Things in our lives have been destroyed because we're chasing down a life that we are not meant to live. We're not meant to control. In our pursuit of the good life, the one that Jesus offers, sacrifice is essential. We have to give up control. In the text that was read today, the rich ruler approaches Jesus, and his status is stated in his name. He is rich, he is wealthy, and if he's rich, you can bet that his family was close. So he had it all together. He gained what he believed made him successful. Yet he knows that there is something he needs to inherit the kingdom of God. Jesus tells this man that even after his religious checklist of good deeds, there is something that he lacks. Jesus says, sell all that you have and distribute it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. This man had his good life. He followed the rules. He had his status. He had control of his fortunes. He had a name that deemed him successful, but Jesus asked him for sacrifice. And that's what Jesus asks all of us for. We must give up the life that we had planned in order to have the life that's waiting for us. The life that was put in motion when God started a family, and that family became a nation, and God gave guidance on how to live the good life together. And that good life is promised to us. Not the one that we imagine or not the one that we try to chase down, but the one that we are offered when we take our eyes off of ourselves and focus on others. And that's what we got to do this week. We got to focus on the life that God called us to, not one of fame and fortune, not one that portrays a veneer of perfection, but one that shows beauty and brokenness. And as the students come up who are going to speak this morning, that's what they got to see. They got to see beauty and brokenness. They got to experience poverty in direct proximity to the rich. They got to see what it's like for people to struggle. And they really got to see what it means to live a life of sacrifice. So these students, we've got 2 from each group that we served in this week. And why don't you guys go ahead and start by saying your name and how many mission trips you've been on, and then where you served this week. You could go to the next slide, please. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Jared. This is my 4th and final mission trip as a student here, and I love them all, but this one was really extra special, being my last one and having all my great leaders, all my great friends with us on this trip. I got to serve in Alpha Van with Ryan, Marissa, Katie, and Claire, with going to Cherrydale and Food and Friends. Food and Friends was an organization that reaches and serves meals prepared freshly and prepared specifically for you as an individual each day. And we got to work with a few people there and make meals for them. And Emmy will tell us what Cherrydale is.
Real quick, why do you get meals from Food and Friends?
You can get your meals from Food and Friends if you have life-threatening illnesses or HIV and AIDS.
I'm Emmy. This was my first mission trip, and I was also an Alpha Man, like Jared said. And Cherrydale, one of the places where we went, is kind of like a rehab center slash elderly senior home. And we got to play lots of games with people, and we did some chair yoga. So that was fun.
I'm Zach. This is my 2nd mission trip. And I got to serve at an organization called Little Lights. It is a summer camp and after-school camp for kids that their families receive less than $9,000 of total income for the year. And so these kids just come and they get to spend their whole day, and the staff there plans their whole day, and they get to do really fun things.
I'm Delaney. This is my 4th mission trip. And so I was also with Zach, and we got to go and serve at one of the DC Central kitchens. And we were there for about 2.5 hours, and we cut kale up. So that was fun. And and it was really cool because we would cut kale up, and then we would wash it. But then we got to see where they would use the kale and then send it to places like Little Lights. So we got to work behind the scenes and see how they were making the food, and then we got to see where the food was actually going. So that was cool.
Hi, my name's Natalie. This was my very first mission trip, and I was in Romeo. And one place we went was the DC General Shelter, which is an old hospital turned into a homeless shelter. And we worked in a teen room where all the teenagers in the homeless shelter can come together a couple nights a week and just hang out with other teenagers. And we went into that room and we cleaned and we sorted toys. And
I was in Romeo.
What's your name?
My name's Connor Smear. This is my first mission trip. And we worked in a place called Martha's Table. We worked with Chef Jojo, and we were making salsa because we were making salsa because Chef Jojo teaches people, homeless people, how to make food for their families so they can have food, I guess. So we were cutting up tomatoes, peppers, onions, corn, onions.
Connor, did you cut onions?
I didn't cut onions, but I cried. So what they do there is they help people so they can make food for their families, and they supply homeless people with jobs lifting the kitchen, help shucking corn and stuff like that. And also they help get breakfast to people, they brought in Panera bagels.
Yeah, at Martha's Table, they thought it was convenient that the Iowa group was there the day that they needed all the corn shucked. So they were thankful for that. Why don't you go ahead and share a story from your week?
All right, so at Food and Friends, where I worked and my group team worked, we got to meet a man named Mr. Charles, and he had been working at Food and Friends for way too long, longer than we've been alive, as he told us. So, and he was just super energetic about it, and Food and Friends does not employ very many people. It is very low employment, but it's really run on volunteers like us. Hundreds and hundreds of volunteers volunteer every day there, so he was one of the ones who's seen all volunteers come through and experience every youth works group that's come through the summer. And he was just really excited to see us and wasn't like disappointed or like he had high expectations for us, and we really exceeded his expectations. So he was super fun to work with and really loved to get to know him.
At Cherrydale, me and a few other students were invited to go help this lady write a letter to her sister. It was her sister's birthday, and she couldn't write. So we were asking her questions about what she wanted us to write, and she just kept saying that she wanted to see her family, and that she wanted her family to come visit her, and that she misses them. And for me, it was very eye-opening because I've grown up around people who love me and had friends who have people who love them. And so it was just really cool to see that because I've never really seen that before, and I just started crying when we walked out because it's kind of emotional.
So at Little Lights, Allie and I got to dance, the dance I did earlier, with this boy by the name Javon. He was 8 years old, and he asked if we were siblings, and Allie and I said no, but we got to explain to him that we were siblings in Christ and that we were children of God together. And so we asked him if he loved Jesus and if he loved God, and he said yes, and so we got to happily say that all three of us were brothers and we were all children of Christ together.
So I have another story from Little Lights, and for the week I got to hang out with a 4-year-old named Heaven, and she was very sassy, so it was just fun to see her. And so I could like tell that she hasn't had like authority growing up because like she would be like, you need to come over here and jump rope, and I was like, no, Heaven, you have to ask them if they would like to jump rope and use your manners. So then she's like, okay, can you please come jump rope? And I was like, there you go. And so I like to make like friendship bracelets, and she saw that I was making one, and she asked if she could have it. And I said, yeah, but only if every time you look at it, it reminds you that you need to listen and use your manners. And yeah, and so throughout like the final day there, I was like, okay, Heaven, what does your bracelet mean? And she'd go, nothing. But then as the time we were leaving, I asked her one last time, and I was like, Heaven, what does your bracelet mean? And she goes, it means to listen. And my heart just like was so full of joy because I know that I made an impact on her life.
So when we got to the DC General Shelter, it was really eye-opening because we first had to go through security and a metal detector, and there were police officers everywhere just patrolling. But while we were cleaning, there were little kids running down the hallways, and it was really good to see that they were still happy and enjoying life, even though they were in this homeless shelter and they didn't have everything that all of us have the privilege of having in our life. It's just good to see that.
At the end of our week, we had a cookout with like a community around us, and at the community, during like the week, I didn't get really served with like kids or like people as much as like other groups did. So when I was there, I really wanted to make an impact on somebody's life. And I was playing basketball with this kid named John and his friend Dwayne. And when we were playing, I asked them if they knew Jesus, and they said yes, but like I could tell that there was something missing. So I said, wait here, and I ran outside and I went to go get my Bible. I walked back inside, and we sat down, and we just talked about the gospel and what Jesus did and what he died for and what sin is and all the great stuff. And then I got their phone numbers, and I'm still in touch with them, and they pray every night, and hoping that I can save some lives.
Great. Lastly, why don't you tell us what God taught you on your trip?
Well, as I said, it's my 4th trip, so all trips are really, you learn something every time. And so this trip to me really meant happiness. It was really happy to see a final trip and to see everybody together, and I really learned that it's not what you have. Many of our people were homeless or didn't have a lot of belongings. We would go to people's houses and deliver them food, and they would barely open the door to see your faces. They were afraid to just show them themselves. But I felt like just being together and showing them love and really showed them how much we care and how much a community can impact each other.
I learned that you have to tell people who you love that you love them, and that you got to spend quality time with people because it could mean went to visit didn't have family that visited them. And so they were really happy to just see us, even though they didn't know who we were. So.
What I learned was that when we were at Little Lights, it was really easy to love on the kids and really easy to like share the gospel with them and tell them who Jesus is. But I need to keep that up when I'm back here because it should be just as easy here to share the gospel, and that should be my fire all the time to share the gospel. And that I just hope that like I can do that more often.
So for me, this was my fourth mission trip, like I said earlier, and in my past mission trips, I've been on like the hard working labor groups of the week, and this year it was different for me because I got to spend a lot more time with kids and like interacting with people, and so it just kind of reminded me that like serving is serving, and you can do it in all sorts of different ways and with the littlest or biggest things that you're doing.
Like Connor said earlier, we didn't get much interaction with other people, but I still learned you can work behind the scenes and do just as much good not interacting with people as they did with the interaction.
With like the community, as we were walking to DC General Hospital where they like supplied homing for like homeless people, I saw like the beauty and the brokenness because like people there, like even though there's like police officers roaming to make sure they're safe, like they're still happy and they're still living their lives. And like being here with like I have like a home and like I have privilege to have like food and like nice like clothes and stuff like that. Like sometimes I get down and I don't realize like the greatness that I have in my life. And just like keep reminding myself that like I'm like it's okay, it's gonna be okay because there's like harder people out there than me.
Yeah, so we had a phenomenal trip, and we're so thankful for your guys' prayers and supports while we were on that trip. I want to just take a minute to recognize our leaders, if you guys could stand up, because without these five, this trip is just simply not possible. And so thank you guys for giving your weeks to help these students. They don't get very much sleep. They have to drive the Pennsylvania Turnpike in the rain. It's crazy. So these guys are just incredible, and I could not do my job without them. These trips would not happen without them. So thank you, leaders, and thank you, congregation, for supporting us. We're really thankful for you.